Most people never noticed the janitor. He arrived before sunrise and left long after the building emptied. His clothes smelled faintly of cleaning soap, and his hands were always rough from work. To everyone else, he was just part of the background, someone who blended into the walls and floors he cleaned every day. But to one little girl, he was the whole world. She was his daughter, and every afternoon after school, she waited for him inside the large performing arts building where he worked. Their home was small and far away, and he could not leave her alone for long hours. So she did her homework sitting on a bench in the hallway, swinging her feet while sounds of music drifted through the air. Violins cried softly from one room. Drums thumped from another. Somewhere down the hall, a piano spoke in slow, careful notes. The girl listened more than she spoke. Music wrapped around her in ways she did not understand. It made her chest feel tight sometimes, and at other times, strangely light. She did not know the names of the songs or the people playing them. She only knew how the sounds made her feel. When the building grew quiet in the evening, those feelings stayed with her. Her father worked quietly, never complaining. He believed hard work was enough to get through life. Dreams were nice, but food on the table mattered more. He loved his daughter deeply, though he did not always know how to show it with words. Instead, he showed it by being present, by making sure she was safe, and by letting her sit nearby while he worked. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the hallways emptied, the girl wandered a little farther than usual. Her father was busy mopping a floor at the far end of the building. She followed the sound of music until she reached a practice room, with its door slightly open. Inside stood a large black piano, its surface shiny under the soft lights. No one was there. She stood at the doorway for a long moment. Her heart beat fast, though she did not know why. The piano felt important, almost alive. She had seen people play before, but had never been close to one. Slowly, she stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of old wood and dust. The bench looked too big for her small frame. She climbed onto it carefully, afraid of making noise. For a second, she hesitated. She did not know if she was allowed to be there, but something inside her told her to try. She lifted one finger and pressed a key. The sound startled her. It was louder and deeper than she expected. She pulled her hand back, then laughed quietly to herself. She pressed another key, then another. Each note felt like it was speaking directly to her. Without thinking, she began to copy a melody she remembered hearing days earlier. Her fingers moved slowly, unsure, but determined. She did not know how long she played. Time felt different in that room. When the music stopped, the silence felt heavy. She climbed down and left the room exactly as she found it, her heart still racing. From that day on, she found excuses to return. Sometimes she played just a few notes. Other times, she stayed longer, trying to recreate sounds she heard in her head. She never told her father. She feared he might say no, not because he was unkind, but because he worried too much. Her father noticed changes anyway. She hummed softly while walking. She tapped rhythms on tables. Her eyes lit up when music played nearby. He asked her once if she liked the sounds in the building. She nodded and smiled but said nothing more. Days passed, then weeks. The girl became more confident. Her fingers still stumbled, but her heart guided them. She played not for anyone else, but because it felt like breathing. She did not care if she made mistakes. Each note was honest. One evening, as she played quietly, she did not notice someone standing outside the door. A man responsible for evening security had stopped to listen. He had heard many skilled musicians over the years, but this was different. The music was simple, yet full of feeling. He stayed silent and listened until she finished. The girl left the room without seeing him. The man said nothing, but the sound stayed with him long after she was gone. That night, her father locked up the building as usual. The girl waited beside him, swinging her feet, unaware that something had begun to change. To her, it was just another evening. To the world beyond those walls, a quiet door had just opened. Neither the janitor nor his daughter knew that the simple act of sitting at a piano would slowly pull their lives in a direction neither of them had ever imagined. After that evening, the girl's visits to the piano became more frequent. She began arriving earlier, lingering longer, always careful not to be noticed. Each time she sat down, she felt as though she entered another world, a place where the troubles of her small life could not reach her. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become her companion, her secret friend. She had no formal lessons. She did not know the names of the notes or the rules of music. She only listened. She remembered melodies she had heard through the corridors, and she tried to recreate them with her own hands. Some notes came out wrong, others rang perfectly. Each mistake made her more determined. Slowly, she began to understand the language of the instrument, not through books or teachers, but through her own heart. Her father noticed her fascination. He watched her fingers tap lightly on tables at home, her lips moving silently as she hummed unknown tunes. One evening, he asked her gently why she spent so much time in the building after school. She smiled but did not answer, only shrugging her shoulders. He did not push her. He trusted that she would tell him when she was ready. The girl often imagined what it would feel like to play for someone who truly listened. In her mind, she pictured large audiences, people moving their heads to her music, eyes closed in appreciation. But she quickly pushed the thought away. This was not about others. This was about her own connection to the sound, the feeling, the freedom she could not find anywhere else. She began experimenting with her own melodies. Sometimes they were soft and sad, echoing the loneliness she often felt. Other times they were bright and quick, capturing the small joys in her daily life. She would play for hours, unaware that time passed. When she finally stepped away from the keys, her hands were sore, but her heart felt light, almost floating. One afternoon, as she played a particularly delicate tune, the janitor happened to walk by. He paused, hearing the notes spill out from the practice room. He froze, listening from the doorway, a mixture of surprise and admiration in his eyes. He had never expected such music to come from his daughter. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching her small fingers move with focus and care. She did not notice him. He quietly stepped back and continued his work, a gentle smile on his face. Her secret did not stay hidden forever. The janitor was careful, but the building was full of people who noticed small things. One evening, a staff member lingered near the corridor while the girl played. The melody floated through the air, capturing attention effortlessly. The staff member leaned closer, unable to resist listening. There was a depth in the music, a raw honesty that could not be taught. The girl finished, unaware of the audience, and left the room with her usual quiet steps. The staff member did not speak. He simply nodded to himself and walked away, carrying the memory of her music. Soon, more people began to notice small glimpses of her talent. Whispers traveled quietly through the building, though none of the adults confronted her directly. They were careful, as if they did not want to disturb the fragile bubble she had created around herself. The girl began to feel more confident in her playing. Her fingers moved faster, more freely. She experimented with combining melodies she had remembered and new ones she created herself. Sometimes, she would play the same tune repeatedly, perfecting each note, discovering how slight changes could alter the emotions in the music. The piano became her world, a place where she could express feelings she could not put into words. Her father noticed the change in her. She laughed more, hummed constantly, and often seemed lost in thought. One evening, as they walked home together, he asked her gently if she wanted lessons. She paused, considering, then shook her head softly. She wanted to play at her own pace, in her own way. She did not want anyone to tell her what was right or wrong. He smiled and accepted her choice, proud that she had found something that made her so alive. The girl's evenings became more structured around the piano. After finishing her homework in the hallway, she would slip away, climb onto the bench, and begin to play. Sometimes she imagined the music was a story, each note a character, each melody a chapter. Other times, she imagined herself flying, her fingers guiding invisible wings across the keys. She did not know that her music was quietly captivating the people around her. One day, as she played a particularly lively tune, a visiting musician happened to pass by. He stopped, drawn by the energy of the notes. He listened for several minutes, intrigued by the skill and emotion behind each sound. The girl did not notice him, her eyes closed, lost in her own creation. When she finally finished and stepped away, he quietly moved on, carrying a sense of wonder with him. Despite her growing skill, the girl remained humble. She did not play for recognition or praise. She played because it felt necessary, because it was the only place she felt completely herself. Each note was a reflection of her world, her experiences, her joys, and her fears. The piano gave her a voice she did not have elsewhere. Even as her talent became more noticeable, she maintained the quiet routines of her life. She helped her father at home, did her homework diligently, and remained aware of the world around her. The piano was her secret, a place where she could be entirely honest with herself. The idea of sharing her music with the world was still distant, almost unimaginable, but it was growing slowly in her mind, like a seed waiting to bloom. Her father, too, began to understand the power of her gift. He did not know how far it could take her, but he saw the joy it brought and the way her face lit up when she played. He began to imagine a future where her music could be more than just a secret. He dared not speak it aloud, fearing it might shatter the fragile magic of her discovery. But inside, hope began to take root. As the days turned into weeks, the girl's connection to the piano deepened. She experimented with dynamics, learning how soft notes could convey sadness and how louder ones could express excitement. She began to feel the room around her, sensing how the echoes from the walls influenced the sound. Every practice session was a lesson, every melody a step forward in a journey she had only just begun. One quiet evening, she lingered at the piano long after the janitor had finished his work. The building was nearly empty, and the world outside seemed far away. Her music filled the room completely, carrying with it the emotions she could not speak. She played until her fingers ached and her eyes drooped, but she did not stop until the last note faded into silence. That night, she walked home with her father in the cold evening air. She held her small bag close, her mind still buzzing with the melodies she had created. Her father glanced at her, proud and silently hopeful, wondering what the future might hold for a girl who had found her own voice. In the quiet of a piano room, little did they know, their small secret was beginning to ripple outward. Each note she played, each melody she shaped, was quietly drawing the attention of those who would soon play a role in changing her life forever. But for now, it was just a girl and her piano, and that was enough. Weeks turned into months, and the girl's visits to the piano became a quiet ritual that shaped her days. She had grown more confident, more expressive, and her melodies carried emotions that seemed far beyond her age. She was no longer just copying tunes she remembered, she was creating them. Sometimes, the music was tender and soft, like a whispered secret. Other times, it was bold and joyful, like laughter filling an empty room. Each note told a story only she knew. But slowly, others began to notice. It happened on a late afternoon when the hallways were mostly empty. A group of teachers had been holding a meeting in a nearby room. As they packed their papers and spoke quietly among themselves, the delicate sound of piano notes drifted through the corridor. One teacher paused, puzzled by the melody. It was simple, yet it carried a depth and emotion that caught her off guard. She followed the sound to the open door and peeked inside. There, she saw the girl, small and focused, her fingers moving over the keys with a confidence that made the music soar. The teacher was silent, afraid to interrupt, yet unable to look away. She was joined by another teacher, and soon a few more gathered at the edge of the doorway. No one spoke. They simply listened, captivated by a sound that seemed too powerful to come from such a young and untrained pianist. The girl played as if nothing had changed, unaware of her audience. She did not pause, did not falter, and did not stop until the last note faded into the quiet of the hall. When she finally looked up, she realized several faces were watching her. She felt a sudden rush of nervousness, her hands trembling slightly. The teachers exchanged glances, impressed and astonished. One of them quietly clapped, and the others followed, careful not to startle her. The girl froze, unsure how to respond. She had never played for anyone before, at least not like this. She had only ever played for herself, for the music itself. The teachers, sensing her hesitation, smiled warmly. One stepped forward and said softly, "That was beautiful. You have a gift." The words shocked her. She had never thought of her music as a gift. She simply played because it made her heart feel alive. Her father had always believed in her in a quiet way, but hearing it from strangers filled her with a strange mix of pride and fear. After that day, her secret began to spread quietly through the building. Staff members who had walked past her playing whispered to one another. A visiting musician mentioned it to a colleague. The girl remained unaware of how much attention she had begun to draw. To her, it was still just a piano, a place where she could lose herself. The attention did not overwhelm her. She continued to practice in the evenings, each session more confident than the last. She experimented with rhythms and chords, blending melodies she had heard with the ones she invented. She played with feeling, letting each note reflect the emotions she could not express in words. The piano became a mirror to her heart. Her father noticed the subtle changes in the way people looked at her. When she walked through the halls, some gave her small smiles of recognition, others nodded respectfully. He could sense that the world was beginning to see what he had always known. Though he did not yet understand how far it could go, he worried about the attention, about how it might affect his daughter. But he also felt a quiet pride swelling in his chest. One evening, As she played a particularly moving piece, a visiting musician stopped outside the room. He had come to the building for a rehearsal, but the music that drifted through the corridor stopped him in his tracks. He listened for several minutes, captivated by the depth and sincerity in her playing. Unlike trained performers who could dazzle with speed and technique, her music carried emotion that could not be taught. Each note seemed to speak directly to the listener's heart. The girl did not notice him, absorbed in her own world. When she finally finished and stepped away, he quietly moved on, carrying the memory of her music with him. He mentioned it casually to a few colleagues, though he did not yet realize how significant it was. The ripple of attention was growing slowly, like waves forming from a single drop in a still pond. Despite the growing interest, the girl remained humble. She did not play to impress others or to gain recognition. She played because it was necessary, because it was the only way to fully express herself. Each session at the piano was a journey, a private exploration of sound and feeling. The audience, if there was one, was a secondary concern. What mattered was the connection between her heart and the music. Her father watched her from afar more often now. He saw how her shoulders relaxed as she played, how her eyes shone with a light that had not been there before. He remembered how timid she had been the first time she touched the keys, and marveled at how much she had grown. Though he worried for her, he also understood that this was her calling, something he could not control but could support with love and quiet encouragement. The girl's skills continued to develop on their own. She began to understand how different tones and rhythms could convey specific emotions. She discovered that she could tell a story without words, using only the piano. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine an entire scene in her mind, letting her fingers bring it to life on the keys. The music became more than sound. It became a narrative, a reflection of her imagination. One afternoon, a group of visiting artists happened to walk past the room while she played. They stopped, intrigued by the depth of her music. Unlike the teachers and staff, they did not immediately understand what they were hearing, but the feeling was undeniable. They lingered, letting the notes reach them, their expressions softening with curiosity and admiration. The girl played on, lost in her own creation, unaware of the growing audience. When she finally stood and left the room, a hush fell among the visitors. They exchanged glances, astonished by the emotion and talent they had witnessed. One of them whispered, "We need to hear more of her. She has something rare." The others nodded, recognizing the truth in the words. The girl's talent was no longer a secret, even if she herself had not realized it yet. The janitor continued his work quietly, unaware of the attention his daughter had begun to attract. He saw only a child who loved music, a daughter who had discovered something that brought her joy and comfort. The idea that her playing could draw strangers and famous artists alike seemed distant, almost unreal. Yet, he felt a sense of pride he could not fully explain, knowing that his daughter had found a place where she truly belonged. As the weeks passed, the girl's confidence grew. She played with more freedom, more courage, and more expression. Each session was an experiment, a test of what she could create with her own hands and imagination. She did not yet realize that her music was quietly changing the way others saw her and the world around her. The story of the janitor's daughter was beginning to unfold in ways neither she nor her father could have imagined. The quiet music that had started as a private escape was now capturing attention, curiosity, and admiration. And although the girl remained unaware of how far her talent could reach, the first steps towards something extraordinary were already in motion. One late afternoon, a famous artist visited the building. He had come for a rehearsal, but his attention was quickly drawn to the faint sound of piano notes drifting through the hallways. Curious, he followed the music, wondering who could be playing with such feeling and depth. He was led to a practice room where, to his surprise, he saw a small girl seated at a large black piano. Her fingers moved over the keys with precision and emotion, her eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music. The artist watched quietly, mesmerized by the purity of her talent. She had no formal training, yet each note was clear and deliberate, each melody full of emotion. He had heard many skilled musicians in his life, but few had the ability to move someone as deeply as this child did. The room seemed to hum with energy, as though the music itself had taken on a life of its own. The girl was unaware of the visitor. She played with her usual intensity, letting the piano speak what words could not. When she finally lifted her hands, the artist stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle her. She jumped slightly, then looked up at the man, her eyes wide with surprise. "That was extraordinary," he said gently. "I have never heard anything like it." The girl blushed, unsure how to respond. She had played for herself, for the music, never imagining that someone so important would listen. Her father, who had followed quietly into the hallway, looked on with pride and disbelief. He could hardly believe that this small, quiet girl was being recognized by someone of such renown. The artist introduced himself and asked if she would play for him again. She hesitated, but then nodded. As she began to play, he listened with rapt attention, noting the subtlety in her touch, the way each note carried feeling, and the natural understanding of rhythm and melody that could not have been learned from books alone. After she finished, the artist spoke to her father. He explained that he was a musician who traveled the world, performing and teaching, and he wanted to help the girl develop her talent. The father listened, overwhelmed by the offer, unsure if it was real. He had never imagined that the piano playing of his daughter, a simple joy at first, could lead to opportunities like this. Over the next few days, the artist returned multiple times to meet the girl. He offered to teach her, to introduce her to other musicians, and to help her perform in front of larger audiences. Each offer was met with a mixture of excitement and hesitation. The girl felt nervous about stepping into a world she had only imagined. The piano had always been her private space, and the thought of sharing her music with others made her heart race. Her father encouraged her to consider the opportunity. He reminded her that talent like hers was rare and that this could be a chance to explore something wonderful. He spoke with gentle patience, knowing that pushing too hard might scare her away, but also wanting her to recognize the potential of what had begun as a simple curiosity. The girl began lessons with the artist, her days now filled with structured practice as well as moments of discovery. She learned new techniques, ways to shape melodies, and how to control the dynamics of her playing. The piano, once a private sanctuary, became a classroom where she explored the depths of her gift. Yet, she never lost the joy and spontaneity that had first drawn her to the instrument. Each note was still infused with the emotion that came from her own heart. Word of her talent began to spread more widely. Other musicians, teachers, and even visiting artists came to hear the janitor's daughter play. They were drawn not only by her skill, but by the honesty and soul in her music. She became known as a prodigy, a young girl whose music could move people in ways that transcended age, experience, or status. The girl's confidence grew with each encounter. She began to perform for small groups, slowly stepping out from behind the walls of the practice room. Each performance was a mix of excitement and nerves, but the music carried her, guiding her through the uncertainty. She realized that her gift could touch others, that the piano could speak for her when words were not enough. Her father remained by her side, quietly supportive. He continued his work as a janitor, but he now walked with a sense of pride. People who had once overlooked him now recognized him as the father of an extraordinary child. Yet he remained humble, careful not to let attention distract from the love and care that had always defined their small family. The story of the girl and the piano began to attract even more attention. Invitations came for recitals, special performances, and mentorships. She was introduced to musicians from different parts of the world, each offering guidance and insight. She listened, learned, and practiced, absorbing knowledge while remaining true to her own voice. Despite the growing opportunities, the girl stayed grounded. She remembered the quiet afternoons spent in the empty hallways, the first notes she had struck on the piano, and the feeling of discovering something magical on her own. These memories kept her humble and reminded her why she played: for the music, for the emotions, and for the joy it brought her and others. The artist who had first recognized her talent became a mentor and a friend. He guided her not only in technical skill, but in understanding the deeper aspects of music: how to communicate through sound, how to connect with an audience, and how to let the piano become an extension of her own voice. Under his guidance, she began to flourish, her playing more expressive, confident, and moving than ever before. The janitor watched his daughter with quiet pride, realizing that the simple act of sitting at a piano had opened doors he could never have imagined. Their life had shifted in ways both surprising and beautiful. The small girl who had once wandered the hallways alone now stood on the path to a future, filled with music, recognition, and the possibility of touching countless lives with her gift. And yet, through it all, she remained the same child at heart. She played with feeling, honesty, and passion, remembering the joy that had first drawn her to the piano. Each note was a testament to her journey from curiosity and discovery to recognition and opportunity. The world had begun to take notice, and soon, her music would reach even farther. drawing the attention of those who could shape her future in ways she had never imagined. The girl's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. From the quiet hallways where she first discovered the piano, she now moved in a world filled with music, opportunities, and recognition. She had begun performing in front of small audiences, and each performance brought new experiences and lessons. Yet, despite the attention, she remained humble, never forgetting the first time she had pressed a key, the first moment she had felt the music speak to her heart. Her father continued to be her quiet anchor. He attended every performance he could, sitting at the back of the room, smiling proudly but staying out of the spotlight. People who had once barely noticed him now greeted him with respect and curiosity. They saw him not just as a janitor, but as the father of a child whose music had begun to touch the hearts of many. Yet he remained the same man, grounded, honest, and devoted to his daughter's well-being. The girl worked hard to balance her new life. She continued her studies, practiced the piano diligently, and attended lessons with her mentor, the artist who had first recognized her talent. Each day brought challenges, long hours, demanding schedules, and the pressure to perform, but she faced them with determination. She remembered that music was not just about skill or recognition. It was about expressing herself, connecting with others, and sharing the joy she had discovered in the quiet practice rooms. Opportunities continued to grow. Invitations to perform at local events turned into chances to play at larger venues. She met musicians from different backgrounds, learned new styles, and experimented with blending them into her own compositions. Each new experience expanded her understanding of music and strengthened her confidence. Yet, she remained true to the melodies that had first inspired her, the ones that came from her heart rather than instruction. Her performances began to draw attention beyond the building where she had first played. Word spread of the janitor's daughter whose music moved audiences. Journalists and local media began to cover her story, fascinated not only by her talent, but by her humble beginnings. She was described as a prodigy, a natural artist whose skills seemed to come effortlessly yet carried deep emotional resonance. She listened quietly to the praise, feeling a mix of pride, humility, and determination. Despite the growing fame, she never lost the joy that had drawn her to the piano in the first place. Every practice session remained a personal journey. She explored melodies late into the night, discovering new ways to express emotions, to tell stories without words. Her compositions began to reflect her life, her experiences, and the world she observed around her. Each note became a piece of her story, a reflection of her heart and soul. Her father watched her evolve with wonder. He remembered the small girl who had wandered the hallways alone, uncertain and quiet, and marveled at the confident young musician she had become. He understood that the piano had given her not only talent, but also a sense of purpose, a way to communicate and connect that went far beyond words. He remained by her side, offering support, encouragement, and the steady love that had always guided her. The mentor who had first guided her continued to shape her growth. He introduced her to techniques and styles, but also taught her the importance of authenticity. Never lose the voice that comes from your heart, he told her. It is what makes your music alive, what makes it touch people. She took his words seriously, ensuring that no matter how skilled she became, her music remained a reflection of herself. As she began performing for larger audiences, the girl discovered the power of her music to bring people together. Strangers would close their eyes, letting the sound carry them into the emotions she had poured into each note. She saw people moved to tears, smiling with joy, or simply lost in thought. She realized that her music had the power to transcend differences, to reach hearts in a way words could not. Through it all, she stayed connected to the building where it all began. She often returned to the quiet hallways, the rooms where she had first pressed the keys, and the benches where she had once waited for her father. It reminded her of the journey she had taken and the simple beginnings that had led to her current life. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a symbol of discovery, perseverance, and the quiet courage to follow one's passion. The world around her continued to change. Invitations to perform in bigger cities, collaborations with other musicians, and opportunities to learn from renowned teachers filled her schedule. She faced challenges and moments of self-doubt, but the memory of her first notes on the piano reminded her why she played. Each time she sat down at the keys, she returned to that sense of wonder, that feeling that music was a part of her, a part of the world she could shape. Her father, always present yet unobtrusive, continued to be her anchor. He never sought recognition for himself, but he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had supported her from the very beginning. The life they shared, simple, grounded, full of love, remained the foundation upon which her talent and dreams grew. As the girl matured, she began to understand the broader impact of her music. She realized that her journey was not just about personal achievement, but about the connections she could forge, the emotions she could stir, and the hope she could inspire. From the daughter of a janitor who had quietly pressed her first key in an empty room, she had become a musician capable of touching hearts and leaving lasting impressions. In the end, her story was not only about talent or recognition, but about the power of discovery, perseverance, and the courage to follow one's passion. It showed that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places, that a single moment of curiosity can grow into a life-changing journey, and that love, support, and belief can guide someone to achieve more than they ever imagined. The girl continued to play, each note a testament to the journey that had begun in quiet hallways and empty practice rooms. Her music carried her forward, connecting her to the world in ways she had never dreamed. And through it all, she remained grounded, humble, and true to the simple joy that had first drawn her to the piano, knowing that the journey was just as important as the music itself.